Masters of the Universe is a 1987 fantasy adventure directed by Gary Goddard.
Eternia is in peril after Castle Grayskull is captured by Skeletor, who's obtained a cosmic key that allows him to travel through space and time to wherever he likes. So that's where he chooses to go. Obviously, if you're familiar with the cartoon, that was his aim in every episode, to capture Castle Grayskull. The inventor of this key, a little creature by the name of Gwildor, fortunately he's made two, him and HeMan and Man-at-Arms and Teela, use it to also gain entry to Castle Grayskull, to recapture it, but unfortunately they're overwhelmed by Skeletor's forces and escape through a hastily made portal, which happens to lead them to Earth, where they then team up with a couple of teenagers to try and get back home and defeat Skeletor and free the sorceress.
Indeed. So, this is week 2 now of our box office misses.
Yep.
Box office films that were supposed to do better than they ended up doing.
Yeah, this one had a budget of $22 million and only made $17.3 million at the box office.
So a lot more than last week. So there was a big kind of closer to its actual budget.
Yeah,
so it made quite. So it did okay.
It did all right. Yeah. I mean, again, we're talking about US takings. Yeah, I guess it did make its money back eventually. I mean, this is another one where it was 7th of August it was released in the US. It didn't make it over to the UK until 26th of December. So, I mean, I don't remember seeing it in the cinema. I was a big He-Man fan, but I don't remember seeing it in the cinema. But maybe because it was released over Christmas and I just wasn't aware of it being out. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember you with your toys and He-Man and everything, but I had He-Man, and I think I had Man-at-Arms. He-Man's head didn't last very long.
Well, they were very squishy.
Yeah, they were very squishy, yeah, and I think I had the tiger.
Cringer, Battle Cat,
that was it. But that's it. That's all I ever had for He-Man stuff. I was never the biggest. I mean, I remember the cartoons. We were talking about this last week. I was big into Mask. I love Mask. I had all the toys for Mask. Yeah, this was. I mean, last week we did Big Trouble in Little China, which was campy and fun. I think this one is campy but bad. But then, I'm not his target audience for this film, and I think a lot of I've read a few reviews out there by a lot of people that they too thought it was campy and bad, but they enjoyed it, and I think it's got a kind of a cult following. And I suppose if you are a fan of He-Man, as you are clearly, then you probably found something. You found something in it that I certainly didn't.
It's got a certain charm to it. Dolph Lundgren is great. He definitely looks the part as He-Man. Mm-hmm. It was quite early on in his career. I think he had a very small part in View to a Kill. Then he was in Rocky IV. I think Red Scorpion came out the same year as this, so I'm not sure which he did first. But it's very early on in his acting career, and he's a little bit wooden sometimes with his delivery, but he's, like I said, he certainly looks the part, and he can swing that massive sword with aplomb.
Some of Schwarzenegger's early films, he's kind of a bit wooden in some of those ones, isn't he? Yeah.
So Frank Langella is great as Skeletor. I mean, the makeup. I mean, obviously this is pre-CGI. The guy's got a skull for a head. I mean, obviously, they've done Ghost Rider a couple of times since, and the CGI in those films is pretty great, and it's literally a skull on a guy's shoulders with flames coming out of it, and it looks great. Unfortunately, in 1987, that was a little bit beyond their capabilities, so it's done with makeup. But it does the trick. And Frank Langella really sells it, and and I don't think he doesn't camp it up too much. I don't think. I think he gets it just right, where he's quite menacing. I've seen interviews where this is still one of his favourite roles. So, he really enjoyed doing it. I think he did it for his son because his son was a big fan of the cartoon. Obviously, if you are a sort of hardcore He-Man fan, then it doesn't have a lot for you because there's very few characters in there. I mean, I think Mattel wanted, there's a massive roster of figures and characters. I mean, there was loads and loads of figures. Not all of them appeared in the cartoon. There's only a very tiny fraction that appear in the film. And of course, there's no Battle Cat because, again, having a giant horse-sized cat just wasn't on the cards, unfortunately. Orko, of course, floated, which again, a bit difficult. I mean, it could be, I'm sure they could have done it, but the cost would have been too much for the budget that they had. So that's why we've got Gwildor, who's sort of an Orko replacement. But yeah, Mattel wanted them to have, every character in it, and the production company were like, nah. How about we have some new characters, and then you can make new toys? And they were like, cha-ching! Yeah, and obviously we barely see Eternia. He-Man is never shown as Prince Adam. There's no King and Queen. So
Prince Adam, I remember that.
There's no Snake Mountain.
Right.
None of the there are vehicles that talking about Orko floating. They have some floating vehicles, don't they? Clearly that was a capability. But again, they don't really look like anything that was in the cartoon.
No, that's the thing, isn't it? That's it doesn't look like either cartoon or the toys.
No.
They don't. I mean, you say, I suppose he looks good in his, his kind of oily chest and cape and
I think if you tried to make the
pants
outfit like it was in the cartoon, it would have looked ridiculous. It's like comic book movies now. They often don't keep the costumes exactly the same as in the comic book, because what works on the page,
of course,
doesn't really translate to the screen very well.
Of course.
So they sort of make them a bit more gritty and a bit more realistic, and practical.
Yeah, which this one was definitely more a gritty to a point. I mean, it gets pretty wacky when they do come to Earth and you bring in these real people. Courtney Cox obviously being probably the biggest export from this film. I was not really a fan. I have seen it before. I sort of I've seen it years ago. I didn't really like it. I think the first time I saw it, but it's what I found from it. Like you said, Frank Langella is clearly having a ball playing Skeletor. James Tolkien, he's in there as a police detective, and he is clearly having the time of his life in there. He's absolutely chewing the scenery.
Although he is basically Mr. Strickland with a badge, isn't he?
Basically, yeah, so, exactly.
He's not particularly a stretch for him.
Not really, but he's clearly having a ball in there, and when he's just reveling being there, and like I said, he's totally chewing the scenery, and you have to give it him for doing that. I think, and Frank Langella as well, and I think whatever you think of it, they are enjoying themselves, much like last week in Big Trouble in Little China. They're having the time of their life being in this crazy film. And it is crazy. It's the whole Earth stuff is very odd.
Yeah.
It's like you've got this massive this onslaught of army, Skeletor's army, and yet no one else sees it. Everyone's
this
asleep,
is the thing.
isn't
The
it?
streets are empty.
Yeah,
which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Apart from the police showing up a couple of times, so it is a bit silly. It's trying very hard. It was made by Cannon Films, who had a bit of a reputation in the 80s. I think in 1986 they released 43 films. So they really went at it. This is the point where they were run by Golan and Globus, and they had a bit of a tendency to hype their films up to the point where the films would never live up to it. And they sold this as a Star Wars of the 80s. Which on the small budget that it had in comparison, it was just never going to happen. The music sounds like a cross between Superman and Star Wars.
That's the trouble, because when it starts up, the intro title scene is very Superman.
It is.
The music written by Bill Conti, who did the score, it's very like Superman. And then that first scene you go into is very like Star Wars. And in fact, the scene itself with them, kind of parading through this giant room feels very Star Wars. And that's probably its failure, is that it was too much like those films.
And even like Skeletor's sort of army, they're basically stormtroopers, aren't they?
They are, yeah. In fact, they even look like the ones in Star Wars. The ones that
the ones that fire the Death Star.
Death Star. They like those ones.
They do.
The helmets, they were a little bit like that, and also it kind of reminded me a little bit like Spaceballs as well.
Yeah,
which obviously was around this time too.
Yeah, it was actually, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah,
it's. I think its budget obviously lets it down. There was a lot of compromises made. I think the final fight between He-Man and Skeletor, I think, was chopped down until it was only like 20% of what it was supposed to be. I don't want to say it was just put out to make a quick buck, but I think there is an element of that.
Well, it's like video game movies now.
Yeah.
They're never, occasionally you might get one that is good, but if you look at a lot of them, they're all they're pretty tragic for the most part. And the same here with with toy cash-ins. It's you're trying to cash in on something that's already a success.
Yeah, I mean the cartoon had ended in 1985. It feels like it went for years. But it didn't. There was a lot of episodes, but it didn't actually go for that long. And I think then She-Ra had sort of taken over. I mean, there was talk of having She-Ra in the film at one point, but that didn't happen. Obviously, the toy sales were starting to flag a bit, and they wanted to sort of reinvigorate it. And yeah, the movie was the way to do that. And obviously, like I said, they had some new characters, which they then made toys of. That was the goal, was to sell toys. It is what it is, isn't it? It was it was a little bit rushed, I think, and just didn't have the budget it really needed.
Yeah, I mean personally I thought it was pretty terrible. I was watching it and I was like, what is this load of nonsense? But and I'm not I know there's a lot of people out there, yourself included, that like it for what it is. It reminds you of a time that you were younger, and there are many films for me that do the same for me, and there's probably films I enjoy that a lot of people think are terrible as well, and that's absolutely fair enough. That's what's great. That's what makes us all human, because we're all interesting and unique, and we don't all like the same stuff.
No.
But it had some odd moments, and there's this odd moment at the end, which I thought was quite a cool idea. So they go back to Eternia.
Yeah.
But they take like half the street with them.
I know.
But then it's like, that never happened before.
I think it's because obviously they have sort of jerry-rig the key thing, don't they? I mean, we haven't talked about that much. It sort of works on music, how I don't know, space and time is tied to musical notes. I don't know, it's not explained that much,
yeah,
is
well,
it?
kind of the music side of it reminded me a little bit of Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, kind of.
The themes sound a little bit like that, actually.
But because it's Skeletor zapped it with his staff, the power source I think is fried, isn't it? So they've connected it to a power thing on the wall of this building.
Yeah, and
so I think because it's connected to it, that's why. That's my theory.
Oh,
anyway.
okay.
Why it brings half the car as well, I don't know, but it
looks nice, and it's something for them to hide behind when they're shooting the bad guys, isn't it? So
just don't question it.
No,
I would say it's probably a little bit similar to Flash Gordon as well. I mean, I think if they had gone crazy and kept the outfits more like the cartoon, then it would have been a lot more like Flash Gordon in campness stakes.
Yeah. I mean, it was it had some silly dialogue. One of my favourite. But not great, but it was it just made me chuckle, because I think they're in the street. There's a big fight scene. Obviously, there's the big fight scene in the music shop. But then at one point, HeMan's like, "Up to the roof," and you're like, "Okay, do you have roofs in Eternia like that?" It just felt a bit like, how do you know that stairs is going to take you to the roof?
Well, the stairs go up.
Well, I know that, but it just felt so unrealistic and silly. And then they have like this gigantic fight on the roof, and there's this hilarious moment where they all all the bad guys they jump at He-Man, and in fact one of them's quite hilarious because the front guy trips up and falls into him, and then he does this whole kind of like he bursts out of it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like in the corner of the frame. There's all this other stuff going on here.
You think that would be like the
big thing where he goes bang, but it's just there in the corner, and it felt really thrown together, and I mean, it was terrible, but it wasn't terrible. No. Do you know what I mean? It was campy, very over the top. Not as good as the campiness of Big Trouble in Little China at all. The acting was pretty diabolical.
I don't know, some of it. I mean, I thought Meg Foster was pretty good as Evil Lynn.
Yeah,
I mean, we've talked about her before because she was in They Live.
She was.
And she's got these piercing blue eyes, isn't she?
She does,
which really work as Evil Lynn.
I was reading was it about this film that they were something about wearing contact lenses, and she was like, no, these are my actual. I think
they thought she was wearing contact lenses.
She was wearing them or something like that, and she was like, no, these are my actual eyes.
Just shut up about it, yeah.
Yeah, which is, she's very, very cool look to her.
So, I mean, the rest of the cast, some of them are quite recognisable. You've got Christina Pickles as the sorceress, who, of course, has a link to Courtney Cox because she played her mum in Friends. Oh. So, and then you've got Robert Duncan McNeil as Kevin, Julie's boyfriend. I think he's best known for Star Trek Voyager. He hasn't done.
You don't watch Star Trek?
No. Okay. I mean, he hasn't done a lot in the last few years, but no, I think that's probably his most famous role. And Chelsea Fields as Teela. I mean, I've seen her in.
Yeah, I recognise her, but
quite a few things. Yeah, and John Cypher as Man at Arms, which
great name.
Yeah, I must have. He definitely. Again, he looks familiar, but I think he's just another one of those actors where
he was kind of an odd. I thought he was a bit of an odd because he's quite old in it already, and he doesn't really fit the part. I didn't think he just.
Well, Man at Arms is Teela's dad. I don't know if you realise that because they don't make it obvious in the film.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if she ever calls him dad or not. I
Fair,
can't remember.
fair. So he's supposed to be an older gentleman.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. There, dude.
Leave the poor guy alone.
I'm not knocking him for his age at all. Not an ageist or anything. But see, there we go. I mean, this is the thing. This is why this film is not for me because I'm not a fan. I'm not the fan that you are.
You don't know the background of these characters.
Exactly. No. And I had a few of the toys when I was younger, but my thing was other toys and other cartoons and stuff like that. So. Yeah, it kind of went over my head a little bit, but I some of it I quite enjoyed. I mean, for the most part, I was just like, oh, this is terrible. But it was kind of fun, terrible, It wasn't...
Yeah, it's not, it's inoffensive and just...
Yeah.
It passes the time.
So you got it on DVD. I quite like that cover. It's quite cool. I mean obviously, because was that the original... That's the original logo, isn't it? Right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, the cartoon was called HeMan and the Masters of the Universe. Of course, you're right. Yeah. I mean, this DVD's from about 20 years ago. It's got a commentary by Gary Goddard on it, and that's it. I think they released it on Blu-ray for the 25th anniversary, so that's 9 years ago. So, but maybe for the 35th anniversary, we're getting all singing, all dancing edition. Probably not.
Probably not.
Maybe we'll get 4K. I doubt it.
That whole stuff in the film, this bit when he's sitting on this thing, to me was so Star Wars. The colours, this red light was very Star Wars. I mean, the thing with He-Man for me was, obviously there's the famous, is it by the power of Grayskull?
Yeah.
Which the whole film I was like, when's he going to do it? He's going to do it, and it was just such a throwaway moment right at the end.
It was a bit, yeah.
He's just like, by the power, and then it's like, is that it? Oh, okay.
And of course, in the cartoon, he says that when he changes from Prince Adam into He-Man, but because we never see him as Prince Adam, so it kind of is a bit pointless. It's
not great.
No, it's not great, but it's just fun. It's just it's got a certain charm to it. There is some good stuff. There's hints of what could have been. I think I think Frank Langella gives it his all. There's some great matte paintings. At the start, there's one used for Castle Grayskull. I mean, Castle Grayskull doesn't look anything like it does in the cartoon, but it's still quite a great image. So, I think if they just spent a bit longer on Eternia, or just not gone to Earth at all, budget. It's easier to film in real streets on this planet than to try and create, a fantastical world with all these strange creatures and stuff, like Gwildor. It was beyond the budget that they had, unfortunately. But yeah, talking about Gwildor, who's played by Billy Barty, who, he's a lot of fun. I mean, his prosthetics are pretty cool. I think that, again, that's another thing that is, for the most part, the effects are pretty decent and the costumes are pretty good. Skeletor's minions, you've got Beastman in there, and I think he's the only, him and Evil Lyn are the only sort of original characters. Then you've got some others. You've got this lizard guy who's got armour on, who's probably the coolest of the new ones, but they kill him off first. And then you've got the weird blade guy with chrome stuff all over him.
Yeah, there's a very odd moment when they're when they go back to Earth first, they go to this school gym, where of course, is it gymnasium?
Yeah.
You should call it in America. But there's this weird scene where Blade, I think it's Blade, he runs in and then something explodes and he turns around and he stops and looks at the floor and he's clearly looking for his marker where he's got to stop. And it's just one of those classic moments where you just feel like the film. It's
almost like you weren't really concentrating on it because you were so bored and you were just looking for weird stuff going on in the background.
Maybe, but no, I was going with it. Like I said, I was looking for the by the
power of Grayskull
moment. So that was Masters of the Universe, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button up there and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. Check out some other videos over there. Come and find us on social media and join us again next week for another video.